The mahogany door swings inward with a crash, and the November wind roars behind her like a living thing. Snow swirls across the threshold. The woman staggers forward, her silhouette framed in the doorway against the darkness outside, and then she collapses. Her name is Mia Harper. She is 27 years old, but the face that hits the polished mahogany bar belongs to someone who has lived decades longer. Her left eye is sealed shut beneath a purple bruise that spreads like a watercolor down her cheekbone. Her blonde hair, matted with snow and blood, sticks to her skull in wet ropes. Handprints, vivid purple darkening to yellow at the edges, wrap around her throat in a strangler's grip, 5 fingers pressed so deep into her skin they look painted on. The caretaker uniform she wears is torn at the shoulder, revealing more bruises beneath, a constellation of violence mapped across her collarbone. She leaves a crimson streak across the mahogany as she slides down the bar. The restaurant freezes. 4 men in black suits at the corner booth stop mid-conversation. Their hands move instinctively toward the weight beneath their jackets. The kitchen doors swing shut. Even the soft jazz from the speakers seems to hold its breath. White tablecloths glow against the candlelit darkness. Crystal glasses catch the light. And bleeding onto the marble floor in her torn uniform, gasping like a drowning woman who has finally reached shore, is Mia Harper. She lifts her face toward the nearest man. Her voice comes out shattered, barely a whisper. "Please." She coughs. The sound is wet. "I need to hide. He is coming. He is going to find me. He is going to." She doesn't finish. Her body is shaking so hard the bar trembles beneath her. In the corner booth, shrouded in shadow, Luca Valenti observes. He is 6'1", with shoulders broad enough to block doorways, and he moves through the world like a man who has never been told no. His tailored black suit costs more than Mia Harper's rent for an entire year. A thin white line runs from his left eye to his cheekbone, a scar from someone who tried to kill him when he was 19 and learned too late to be more careful. His dark hair is brushed back from his face, revealing the kind of bone structure that could be beautiful if his eyes were not so cold. At 34, Luca Valenti controls half of Boston's underworld. Politicians call him. Judges call him. Men who disappear are never spoken of again. He watches the bleeding woman without moving. His lieutenant Tony stands up, his hand on his weapon. Enzo, his second, steps forward. Both men are waiting for the signal that will tell them to remove her, to drag her out into the blizzard, to handle whatever problem has found its way into their restaurant. But Luca does not move. His dark eyes stay fixed on Mia Harper's ruined face. His expression shifts, and in that moment, the cold calculation in his gaze transforms into something raw and devastating, something so consuming it pulls the air from the room. He stands slowly. His chair scrapes against the Italian marble. His voice, when he speaks, is deep and solid like an oath, and every man in the restaurant straightens. "Do not touch her." Enzo and Tony exchange a glance. In 12 years, they have never heard him use this tone over a stranger. Over anyone. Luca moves from the booth with measured steps. The candlelight catches the gold watch on his wrist as he reaches down to help Mia up. His hand, calloused, scarred, a hand that has done terrible things, is warm against her blooded shoulder. "What is your name?" She looks at him with her one good eye, and in that moment, she sees the most powerful man in Boston kneeling beside her like a man soothing a lost child. "Mia," she whispers. "Mia Harper. Mia." He says her name like a prayer. "You are safe now." But what Mia does not realize in this moment, what she cannot possibly know, is that 3 days ago, in a moment she has already forgotten, she saved this man's daughter. The little girl's name is Emma. She is 7 years old. 3 days earlier, during a school field trip to the aquarium downtown, Emma's teacher made a catastrophic mistake. Emma wandered away from the group, confused and looking for the bathroom, and found herself in the street beyond the entrance. Traffic screams. A yellow taxi brakes too late. Emma is small, 5 foot tall, easy to miss. And then hands grabbed her, gentle, quick, certain hands, and pulled her back onto the curb. A woman in a caretaker's uniform cradled a child against her chest, trembling with adrenaline, whispering, "You are okay. You are okay. I have you." The woman held Emma until paramedics arrived. Until Luca's security detail came screaming around the corner. Until the little girl was returned to the restaurant owner who had hired Luca Valenti's protective services without ever knowing who he was. That woman was Mia Harper. She never learned whose daughter she had saved. By the time Luca arrived, she was already running back to her other job, back to the care facility, back to the double shifts that were slowly killing her. Now she bleeds in his restaurant, and in 12 years, Luca has never felt anything move in his chest the way this moment moves it. "Come," he says, and his hand is steady beneath her arm. "Come upstairs. We will call a doctor." She tries to protest. Her voice breaks. "I cannot pay." "You will not pay anything." His eyes are flat now, dangerous. "Tell me who did this to you." Mia's body goes rigid. The fear that floods her face is something old and familiar, the fear of someone who knows that speaking a man's name out loud can be the most dangerous thing she has ever done. His name is Douglas Hale. The moment those words leave her mouth, something shifts in the restaurant. Tony and Enzo exchange another look. They have heard this name before. Not through official channels, through the network of people who know about such things. A man who controls women the way other men control property. A man with money and connections and no conscience. Luca's hand tightens slightly on Mia's shoulder, and his voice becomes something sharp and terrible. "And how long has he been hurting you?" 8 months. She can barely get the words out. "He says I borrowed $125,000 from him. I never did. I never asked for anything. But he says I owe it, and if I do not pay him by tomorrow night, he will," her voice cracks. "He will put charges on me. Fake charges. He has friends in the police. He has already threatened it." The restaurant is so quiet you can hear the clock on the wall. It ticks 12 times. 13. 14. The sound is loud as a heartbeat. Luca's expression does not change, but something in the way he looks at Mia, really looks at her, is the most frightening thing she has ever seen. Because she can feel him calculating. She can feel the weight of his power, the momentum of his empire, shifting direction like a hurricane turning toward shore. "Come upstairs," he says quietly. "We will have your wounds treated. You will eat something. You will sleep in a safe place. And tomorrow, we will talk about Douglas Hale and what we are going to do about him." She wants to ask what that means. She wants to say no, that she cannot possibly involve this man, that whatever he is, and she is beginning to understand that he is something dangerous, she will ruin his life by association. But fear is a stronger thing than caution, and hunger is a stronger thing than pride. So she nods. Luca's hand finds the small of her back, and he guides her toward the private elevator at the far side of the restaurant. His men watch in stunned silence. In 15 years, they have never seen him touch anyone with gentleness. In 15 years, they have never seen him offer mercy to a stranger. The elevator doors close, and Mia and Luca disappear into the levels above. Behind them, on the marble floor where Mia's blood has begun to dry, Tony speaks first, his voice barely above a whisper. "What just happened?" Enzo shakes his head slowly. His hand is still on his weapon, a weapon he will not need tonight because the threat was never in this restaurant. "I do not know," Enzo says. "But I know that Douglas Hale just made the worst mistake of his life." Outside, the November wind tears through the streets of Boston like a blade wrapped in ice. The blizzard continues to fall, erasing footprints, covering evidence, cleansing the city of the night's violence. And somewhere in the darkness, unaware that his world is about to collapse, Douglas Hale waits in an apartment across the city, certain that Mia will come crawling back, certain that fear will break her the way it has broken everything else in her life. He does not yet know that she has found shelter with the most powerful man in Boston. He does not yet know that the decision he made, to hurt the wrong woman on the wrong night, has written the ending of his own story. The elevator rises through Luca's private floors, carrying Mia toward safety, toward answers, and toward the moment that will change everything about the life she thought she understood. Behind her, the restaurant returns to its quiet elegance, its white tablecloths and candlelight, as if nothing has changed. But everything has changed. The moment she walked through that door with violence written on her body, the moment Luca Valenti recognized the woman who saved his daughter, the balance of power shifted. And now the real story begins. 3 days earlier, the blizzard had not yet begun. The sky hung gray and heavy over Boston, threatening snow that had not yet fallen, and the air carried the particular cold of early November, the kind that seeps through fabric and settles into bone. At 3:15 in the afternoon, Mia Harper walked home from her shift at Mercy Care Home, her body moving on muscle memory because her mind had checked out somewhere around hour 12 of her 16-hour day. She wore the caretaker uniform they issued her, pale blue scrubs faded from too many washings, covered now by a cardigan so thin it offered no real warmth, only the pretense of it. Her blonde hair, pulled back in a ponytail so tight it gave her a headache, had escaped in wisps around her face. Her hands, calloused and raw from constant washing and cleaning, hung at her sides. She looked like what she was, a woman who had been running on empty for so long that empty had become her baseline. The streets of downtown Boston moved around her in their afternoon rhythm. Businessmen in coats that cost more than her monthly rent. Women with shopping bags. Students cutting through on their way to somewhere warm. Mia existed among them but not with them, invisible the way service workers become invisible, present but unseen, a fixture rather than a person. Her plan was simple: get home to her apartment in Dorchester, eat the leftover soup she had saved from the care home's kitchen, count the $78 in the coffee can one more time to make sure it was still there, and sleep for 4 hours before her night cleaning job began. Then repeat. Always repeat. But at 3:17, as she crossed Boylston Street near Copley Square, everything changed. The screaming came first. A child screaming, high and terrified and cutting through the city noise like a blade. Mia's head snapped up, instinct moving faster than thought. And there, in the intersection ahead, a small figure in a bright red coat stood frozen in the crosswalk. A 7-year-old girl, dark curls escaping from beneath a winter hat, her face twisted with panic as a delivery truck barreled toward her, the driver's eyes wide with horror because he was not going to stop in time. Everything after that happened in the space between heartbeats. Mia dropped her work bag. She did not think. Thinking would have slowed her down. She ran into the intersection as the traffic light changed, as horns blared in warning, as the truck's brakes screamed. A yellow cab swerved left. A sedan honked and veered right. The delivery truck's massive grille filled the world, metal and chrome and the smell of diesel fuel. Mia reached the child and scooped her up in a single motion, lifting the girl's weight against her chest and pivoting hard to her left. They hit the sidewalk together, rolled, and came to rest against the base of a newspaper stand. The delivery truck thundered past so close that the wind of it knocked the breath from Mia's lungs. For a long moment, there was only the sound of traffic and horns and the small gasping sounds of a child who had nearly died. Mia sat up slowly, the girl still clutched against her, and looked down at the small face pressed against her shoulder. The child's eyes were wide with shock. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her body trembled like a leaf in a hurricane. "You are safe now, sweetheart," Mia whispered, and her voice was steady even though her hands shook. "I have got you. You are safe. My name is Mia, and you are safe." The girl did not speak. She could not speak. Her mouth opened and closed but no words came out, only small whimpering sounds. Mia held her closer and began to hum. It was an old lullaby, something her mother had sung to her when she was small, before her mother's illness had taken everything, her health, her job, her ability to care for anyone but herself. The melody was simple and broken, but it was real, and the girl's trembling slowly began to ease. People gathered around them. A teacher, breathless and frantic, screaming the child's name. "Emma! Oh God, Emma!" 3 other adults in winter coats and name badges, the other field trip supervisors, moving toward them with expressions of pure panic. Someone was calling 911. Someone else was asking if the child needed an ambulance. The city, briefly, had stopped for a moment of crisis. Mia did not move. She held the girl, Emma, and kept humming that broken lullaby until the teacher reached them and Emma released Mia's cardigan, transferring her grip to the adult's arms. Even then, as they carried her away, the child twisted her body to look back at Mia, her small hand reaching out as if she could pull Mia along with her. "What is your name?" the teacher asked Mia, pen poised over a clipboard, trying to document what had just happened, because bureaucracy does not pause for miracles. "Does it matter?" Mia asked quietly. Her voice carried no bitterness, only fact. "She is safe now. That is what matters. But we need to." "I have to get to work," Mia said. She picked up her bag from where she had dropped it, aware that traffic had resumed around them, aware that the moment had passed and the world was moving forward again. "She is safe. That is enough." She walked away before they could ask more questions, aware that the teacher was staring after her, confused. Behind her, Emma called out once, a small voice saying, "Wait. What is your name?" But Mia did not turn back. She never asked the girl's last name. She never knew that the child she had pulled from traffic was Emma Valenti, daughter of the most powerful man in Boston's underworld, a girl who was supposed to be untouchable, protected by forces most people could not imagine. All Mia knew was that a child had lived because she had run without thinking. All she knew was that the humming had worked, that her steady voice had calmed a terrified child, that for 15 minutes she had mattered in a real and tangible way. It was not much. But it was something. That same evening, Luca Valenti received a call at 4:43 in the afternoon. He was in his office on the 42nd floor of a downtown building that bore his name in polished brass letters, though his name meant nothing there. It was a consulting firm, the official story, the legal facade. The call came from Emma's school. "Mr. Valenti, Emma is safe, but there was an incident during the field trip. A near accident. She is emotionally shaken but physically unharmed. We have contacted the emergency services as a precaution, but she has been cleared. You should know that she was rescued by a woman. A woman who was nearby. She acted immediately and pulled Emma from danger." Luca's face had gone white. The color simply drained from it, leaving him looking like a marble statue, a perfectly carved thing with no feeling in it at all. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, controlled, which meant he was more dangerous than if he had screamed. "Bring her here. Bring Emma to my office. Now." "Of course, sir. We will have her there within the hour." He hung up without saying goodbye and walked to the window. His office looked out over Boston, the entire city spread beneath him like a kingdom he had built stone by stone and blood by blood. Below, people moved through their small lives, unaware of the power structures that shaped their existence, unaware of the men who could move them like pieces on a board. He had built his empire to protect Emma from exactly this kind of vulnerability. He had surrounded her with security, with resources, with every advantage that money and power could buy. And a random woman in a faded cardigan had pulled her from traffic instead. When Emma arrived at his office, she went directly to his arms, burying her face in his chest. She was still wearing her winter coat. She still smelled like the snow that had not yet fallen, like the fresh cold air of near death. Her small hands gripped his designer suit jacket as if he could hold her together through sheer force of will. "The lady," Emma said into his shoulder, her voice muffled and small. "Papa, the lady who saved me. She smelled like soup and she sang to me. She sang so quietly, but I could hear it. She made me feel safe." Luca's jaw tightened. His men, standing near the door, exchanged a look they had practiced 1,000 times, the look that said they understood without speaking, the look that meant action would follow. "What did she look like?" he asked his daughter, his voice gentle in a way he reserved only for her. "She was pretty," Emma said. "But she was sad. Her eyes were very sad." Luca ordered his men to find her. The description was minimal: a blonde woman, late 20s, pale blue scrubs, cardigan, blonde hair. She had been near Copley Square at 3:15 in the afternoon on this specific day. She had pulled his daughter from traffic and then disappeared into the crowds of the city. He offered no bounty because he did not need to offer money to men who understood that the safety of Emma Valenti was the most important thing in their world. But the search led nowhere. No name. No address. No way to find the ghost of a woman who had performed an act of kindness and expected nothing in return. So Luca did what he always did when a problem could not be solved: he moved on. He stored the information in his mind, filed it away with all the other small facts and details that had made him powerful. Somewhere in Boston, there was a woman who had shown mercy to his daughter. If fate brought their paths to cross again, he would know. And he would remember. 3 blocks away, in an apartment in Dorchester so small that the kitchen and bedroom were visible from the living room, Mia Harper sat on the edge of her bed and counted her money. $78. A 20, a 50, and 8 single bills spread across her palm like they might disappear if she looked away. The coffee can that held the rest, the savings of 8 months of double shifts and night cleaning jobs, sat empty on the nightstand. It had contained $2,847 that morning. It had contained the promise of her mother's surgery in Ohio, the promise that maybe, after 3 years of chemotherapy and bankruptcy and the slow dissolution of everything her mother had built, there might be healing instead of just survival. At 11 p.m. that night, Douglas Hale kicked in her apartment door. He was a large man, 47 years old, with the kind of softness that comes from money and entitlement, his body running to fat beneath expensive shirts. His face was flushed. His breath smelled like whiskey and rage. Behind him stood Evelyn Blackwell, a woman in her early 50s with the kind of beauty that had been surgically maintained at tremendous cost, her blonde hair styled perfectly despite the late hour, her clothes elegant and coordinated. She smiled like a predator who had just cornered prey. "Hello, Mia," Evelyn said, her voice smooth as silk wrapped around a blade. "We have come to collect what you owe us." "I do not owe you anything," Mia said. She did not stand. She remained on the edge of her bed, small and still, a creature that knew the value of not moving when a predator was near. Douglas pulled a stack of papers from his jacket. Loan documents. Contracts. All bearing her signature, forged in a hand that was close enough to hers that the forgery would hold up in court. $125,000, he said, borrowed 3 months ago. You have 3 days to repay it, or we file criminal charges. Fraud. Theft by deception. A felony that will put you in federal prison for a minimum of 5 years. That is not real, Mia said quietly. Does it matter? Evelyn asked. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the cheap linoleum. We have 3 judges in our pocket. We have a police captain who will sign off on the charges immediately. We have documentation that is perfect enough that no defense attorney in this city will touch it. You signed a loan agreement, Mia. That is the only reality that matters now. The reason for this destruction came down to $80 that Evelyn believed Mia had stolen from her years ago, when Mia had worked as a maid in Evelyn's mansion, money that Evelyn had lost and blamed on the help, the way wealthy people do. The reason for Douglas's involvement was simply that Evelyn had asked, and Douglas had been sleeping with her for the better part of a year, and men like Douglas did whatever women like Evelyn asked them to do. I do not have that money, Mia said. I do not have anything. Then you have 3 days to find it, Douglas said. He pulled out his phone and showed her a video he had recorded earlier that day, footage of the coffee can, empty, the money gone, documented for evidence. We know you have been saving. We know you have been hiding cash. $78. That is all you have left, is it not? That is all you have to your name. Mia said nothing. There was nothing to say. The destruction was complete. The trap was perfect. There was no way out because there had never been an intention to allow one. 3 days, Evelyn repeated, moving toward the door. Find $125,000, or we will destroy you completely. You will spend the next 5 years in a federal prison, and your mother will die alone in Ohio while you are behind bars. Your choice, Mia. Steal it, beg for it, prostitute yourself for it. We do not care how you do it. Just do it. They left her there in her small apartment, in her small bed, with her $78 and the weight of an impossible choice. The apartment was silent except for the sound of breathing, a fast, panicked animal. At 1:47 in the morning, in a third-floor studio that smelled like stale coffee and desperation, Douglas Hale stood in Mia Harper's bedroom with his fist wrapped around a coffee can. Empty. His jaw clenched so tight his teeth might have cracked. In the darkness outside, sitting in a black Mercedes with the engine running, Evelyn Blackwell watched the building through the windshield, speaking into an earpiece in a voice like ice. "Is she there?" Douglas's voice crackled back, furious. "She is here. But the money is gone." Mia cowered in the corner of her bedroom, her body pressed against the radiator, which clanked and hissed like it might explode. She had heard him break through the lock downstairs. Had heard his footsteps on the creaking stairs, steady and unhurried, like a man who knew he had nowhere to run to, no one to run to. She had seen him only briefly in the hallway light, broad-shouldered, 43 years old, his face twisted into something that did not look human anymore. "Where is it?" he had snarled, and she had whispered, "I do not have it, Douglas, I do not," but he was already moving past her, already searching, already finding the coffee can beneath her mattress where she kept every dollar she had scratched together in the past 8 months. "Which apartment?" Evelyn's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Bedroom." Douglas appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the hallway light. In his hand was the can. In his other hand was her entire life. He stared at the emptiness of it, at the thin layer of dust on the metal bottom, and something shifted in his expression. Something broke. He turned to face her, and Mia saw the moment rage became violence. "This is all you have." His voice was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was quiet and deadly, like a blade wrapped in ice. $78. That is all you have to your name. "I have been saving for my mother's surgery," Mia whispered. "I was going to give you the money. I just needed." He crossed the room in 3 steps. She saw his hand rise. She saw his face. She did not see the punch, only felt it, a white explosion of pain across her left eye, her head snapping backward into the wall. The radiator behind her was so hot it burned through her thin shirt, but the pain meant nothing compared to what came next. His hand closed around her throat. His fingers were thick and scarred, and they pressed into her windpipe with the casual cruelty of a man who had done this before. He lifted her off the ground, her feet dangling, her shoes scraping against the wall, leaving dark marks on the yellow paint. Black spots bloomed across her vision. Her lungs screamed for air. His grip tightened, one hand, the other still holding the empty coffee can like it was evidence of a crime she had committed simply by surviving. "You were supposed to have it," he hissed. "Evelyn said you were saving. Evelyn said you had been hiding cash for months." Mia's hands came up instinctively. Her nails, bitten to the quick from stress, raked across his face. She felt skin tear. She heard him shout, and suddenly she was falling, crashing onto the hardwood floor, gasping for air, her lungs burning like they were on fire. Douglas staggered backward, one hand going to his cheek where 4 parallel scratches were beginning to bleed. "You marked me," he said, almost conversationally. Then he stepped forward and kicked her in the ribs. Once. Twice. The third time she curled into a ball, her arms wrapped around her stomach, trying to make herself smaller, trying to disappear. "Get up," he said. "Get up." She could not move. Her eye was swelling shut. Her throat felt crushed. She tasted blood, her own blood, and something else she did not want to identify. She lay on the floor in her thin nightgown in her apartment that cost $850 a month, which meant she worked 50 hours a week at minimum wage simply to keep a roof over her head, and even that was not enough. Nothing was ever enough. Douglas grabbed her by the hair and dragged her to the window. The blizzard outside was absolute, snow falling in sheets so thick you could not see the streetlight below. The wind howled against the glass. He forced her to look out at the storm, at the December night that was probably -15 degrees, and he spoke directly into her ear, "You have 3 days to get me $125,000. Evelyn has judges. Evelyn has prosecutors. Evelyn has cops in her pocket. If you do not come through, she is going to file a theft report saying you stole that money from her years ago when you were working in her house. We have documents. We have witnesses. You will spend 5 years in a federal prison and your mother will die alone in Ohio while you are behind bars waiting for parole. He released her and she collapsed against the wall. 3 days, Mia. Find the money or we destroy you completely. He left the way he had come, footsteps thundering down the stairs. She heard the door slam. Through the window, blurred by her swollen eye, she saw headlights, the black Mercedes, idling, waiting. Douglas climbed into the passenger seat. The car pulled away, leaving only snow and darkness behind. Mia lay on the hardwood floor for 17 minutes. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus when she was 19 years old and homeless. She did not scream. Screaming meant neighbors would call the police, and the police had stopped coming to her apartment after the 3rd time she had called about Douglas. They had made it clear with their tired eyes and their dismissive sighs that she was not worth their time. She simply lay there, feeling her ribs expand and contract with shallow breaths, watching the window, watching the snow, thinking about the impossible mathematics of her situation. $125,000 in 3 days. She had $78. She had a mother in Ohio who needed $47,000 for cancer surgery. She had an apartment she could not afford and a job that paid minimum wage and absolutely no one in the world who would help her because she was exactly what they said she was, nobody. Just a caretaker with bruises on her neck and blood in her mouth and no options left. But somewhere in her mind, a small light flickered. 2 blocks away. The Italian restaurant that was always open late. The one with warm light spilling onto the snowy sidewalk. The one where she had worked briefly, years ago, before they had let her go because she was too clumsy with the fancy plates. She remembered it because the owner's daughter had come in once, a beautiful little girl, maybe 7 years old, with dark curls and her father's intense eyes. She remembered thinking that some people were born with everything while others were born with nothing, and that was simply how the world worked. She dressed in the clothes she could find, a sweater with a hole in the shoulder, her winter coat that was too thin, gloves with fingers missing. She left the $78 in the apartment. She had nowhere to put it. She had nowhere to go. She simply walked out into the blizzard and turned left on Hanover Street, moving toward the only place she could think of that was warm, that was open, that might let her sit for an hour until morning came. The cold was a living thing. It seized her lungs with every breath. The wind pushed her sideways. Snow accumulated on her hair, on her eyelashes, in the corners of her mouth. Her fingers went numb inside the gloves with missing fingers. She could not feel her toes. The world narrowed to a tunnel of white, and at the end of the tunnel was a small bright rectangle, the restaurant's door, the restaurant's lights, the restaurant's promise of warmth. She did not know who was inside the restaurant tonight. She did not know that a man named Luca Valenti had been sitting in the same private booth for 3 nights straight, obsessively waiting for any sign of the woman who had saved his daughter. She did not know that his men had been searching the city, showing her photograph to every person they could find, following leads, tracking her movements. She did not know that Emma, his 7-year-old daughter, had drawn pictures of the beautiful woman who had held her and spoken softly and made her feel safe, and those pictures were sitting on a table in his office like sacred objects. She only knew that she had to get inside before the cold stopped her heart. She pushed through the restaurant door at 1:58 in the morning, leaving a trail of melting snow on the polished floor. The warmth hit her like a physical thing. She stumbled forward, her vision blurring, her good eye struggling to focus in the bright light. She tried to walk toward the bar. She tried to stay standing. She made it perhaps 10 feet before her legs simply gave out, and she collapsed against the mahogany counter, leaving crimson streaks on the polished wood, blood from her split lip, from her torn cheek, from the violence she carried inside her body like a secret no one would ever want to know. The restaurant went absolutely silent. Even the soft jazz on the speakers seemed to pause. From the private booth in the back, Luca Valenti rose from his seat. His 2 lieutenants, Tony and Enzo exchanged a look of confusion. No one approached their boss's booth uninvited. No one interrupted his night. But before they could move, before they could do anything, Luca was walking toward the woman on the floor with a predatory grace that made grown men step aside. He kneeled beside her on the cold marble, and the moment he did, everything changed forever. The morning light filtered through the restaurant windows like a blade, cutting across the empty dining room where no customers had been seated for hours. Luca had ordered the space cleared. Every table pushed to the perimeter. Every door locked except one. The staff had disappeared into the kitchen, pretending not to hear what was about to happen. Tony and Enzo stood on either side of the entrance, their bodies like stone statues carved to block anything that tried to pass through. At 11 o'clock in the morning, when the sun reached its highest point and cast no merciful shadows, Douglas Hale crashed through that entrance like a man who did not understand the meaning of his own death approaching. He was 43 years old, with the kind of soft face that crumbles easily under pressure, a chin that folded into his neck, eyes that darted like a cornered rat's, hair that had begun its retreat from his skull years ago and left him looking perpetually younger and older simultaneously. He wore a shirt that cost $200 but hung on him like a dirty sheet. His hands were shaking. "I need to see Mia Harper." His voice cracked on her name. "I know she is here. She stole from me. She is a thief, and I am pressing charges." Tony did not move. Neither did Enzo. The silence that followed was not a pause, it was a weapon. From the private booth in the back, Luca rose from his seat. He had been sitting there since 5 o'clock in the morning, watching Mia sleep fitfully on the sofa beside the kitchen, her body still trembling even in unconsciousness, her face wrapped in clean bandages that would need changing every 4 hours. He had not slept. He had simply sat there, the way a man might sit beside a candle in the wind, understanding that his presence was the only thing keeping it from being extinguished. When Douglas saw him, the color drained from his face so completely that his skin took on the texture of parchment left too long in the sun. Luca was 6'2", with shoulders that moved through space like a man accustomed to every inch of air belonging to him. He wore an open-collared white shirt that revealed the edge of a scar running from his collarbone to his ribs, not a wound from violence but the mark of a surgery his body had survived 30 years ago. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored to fit him like it had grown from his own skin. A gold watch caught the light on his wrist, worth more than Douglas's entire car. But it was his eyes that stopped every breath in every body. They were storm gray and absolutely empty of mercy. "You put your hands on a woman under my protection," Luca said. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "You put your hands on her throat. You tried to take the $78 she had in the world." Douglas's mouth opened and closed like a fish stranded on sand. I did not know who she was. She owes me money. $125,000. It is a loan. She borrowed it 3 years ago." Luca did not speak. He simply extended his hand, and Enzo placed a folder into his palm as if this had been choreographed 1,000 times before. "Show me the loan documents," Luca said. Douglas fumbled in his jacket pocket with hands that had become something less than hands, trembling collections of bone and desperation. He produced papers, already wrinkled and sweating from his fingers. Luca opened the folder and looked at them for exactly 3 seconds. Anyone watching could have timed a heartbeat in that silence. "These are forgeries." Luca's voice dropped to a whisper, and every person in the restaurant who could hear him felt their spine compress like they had been punched. "You fabricated a debt to terrorize a woman who had $78 in the world. Who was working double shifts at a diner that closed at 2 in the morning. Who had not eaten a full meal in 6 days. Douglas was crying now, tears running down his face, his mouth forming words that never became sound. "My ex-girlfriend Evelyn Blackwell helped you create these documents," Luca continued. "She gave you information about Mia's movements. She wanted me distracted while she fed intelligence to the Russo family about my shipments. You were a tool. A small, pathetic tool used to break a woman who had done nothing to either of you except survive." The door to the restaurant opened, and Douglas bolted. He made it perhaps 4 steps before Tony caught him by the collar and dragged him backward with the casual efficiency of a man moving furniture. Douglas screamed. He screamed her name. He screamed that he was sorry. He screamed that he would disappear, that they would never see him again, that he was nothing, that he was nobody. "That is correct," Luca said, watching without expression. "You are nobody. Take him to the Russo family warehouse on Atlantic. Tell them it is a gift for their patience." Douglas's screams echoed down the street and then faded, the way a siren fades when an ambulance has passed. The door closed. The silence returned, absolute and suffocating. Luca walked back to the private booth and sat beside Mia, who had woken during the screaming. Her eye that was not swollen focused on him with an intensity that made his chest tighten like a fist. "It is over," he said. "Evelyn," Mia whispered. "She is still out there." At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Evelyn Blackwell arrived at the restaurant in a black Mercedes that cost more than a house, wearing a designer dress that had been custom-fitted for her body, her hair styled with the kind of precision that only money could purchase. She had never lost the ability to walk into a room as if she owned every corner of it. Her smile was poisonous, the smile of a woman who believed that power was something that could never be taken from her, only temporarily displaced. The hostess tried to stop her, but Evelyn moved past her like she was made of smoke. She saw Luca sitting in his private booth. She saw Mia beside him, wearing clean clothes now, a simple dark dress that belonged to one of the servers, her face wrapped in fresh bandages but her posture no longer broken. And for a moment, Evelyn's smile flickered. "Oh, Luca," she said, gliding toward them. "You always did collect broken things. Is this your new project? A battered waitress? How very charitable of you." Mia stood. Her hands were trembling, but her voice came out steady and clear, like something that had been hammered into shape by force and emerged stronger. "I know you helped him create the documents. I know you gave him information about me. I know you wanted Luca distracted so you could execute your plan with the Russo family." Evelyn laughed. It was a sound like broken glass sliding across marble. "Prove it. I have judges in my pocket. I have prosecutors who return my calls at midnight. I have the police commissioner's personal number. You are nobody, sweetheart. You are a nobody who will disappear, and no one will even notice you were gone." Luca stood. His movement was so slow and deliberate that it seemed to take several centuries. "You fed classified information to the Russo family," he said. "You helped them plan the hit on my shipment last month. You used Douglas to distract me while you consolidated your position with my rivals. You are a traitor, Evelyn. And you were sloppy about it." He slid a folder across the table. Evelyn's hand shook as she opened it. Inside were phone records, bank transfers, recordings of conversations that had never been meant for anyone else's ears. Her voice, unmistakable, discussing shipment routes. Her voice, arranging payments. Her voice, laughing about Mia being a collateral damage in a much larger operation. The color drained from her face so completely that her makeup looked like it was painted on a corpse. "You cannot prove." The restaurant doors burst open. Federal agents, 6 of them, flooded through the entrance with the synchronized precision of a trained unit. They moved with the kind of urgency that meant this was not a discussion or a negotiation. This was an arrest. "Evelyn Blackwell, you are under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy, corruption of public officials, and fraud," the lead agent said. Evelyn was screaming before the handcuffs touched her wrists. She screamed that Luca would regret this. She screamed that her family would destroy him. She screamed that this was not over, not ever, that she would find a way to make him pay. Luca's voice cut through her rage like a blade through butter. "Your family disowned you 1 hour ago. I made sure of that personally. They released a statement saying they no longer recognize you as a member of their organization. You are alone, Evelyn. And that was always your greatest fear, was it not? To be nobody." She was dragged away in handcuffs, her designer dress tearing on the edge of a doorframe, her screams fading as the black SUVs pulled away from the restaurant into the Boston afternoon. In the 48 hours that followed, the systematic destruction was meticulous and absolute. Douglas Hale disappeared into the Russo family warehouse and never emerged. His car was found abandoned on a highway outside the city, the doors left open, blood on the steering wheel. By evening, his apartment had been emptied, every photograph, every document, every trace of his existence scrubbed away. His employer received a call saying he had quit without notice. His bank accounts were frozen by federal order. By morning, his name appeared on a missing persons report. By the end of the week, no one was looking anymore. He had been erased from the world with the same efficiency that someone might erase a pencil mark from paper. Evelyn's penthouse was raided at dawn by FBI agents who took photographs of everything and leaked those photographs to every media outlet in the city. Her art collection, her jewelry, her designer wardrobe, all of it documented, all of it seized. Her assets were frozen. Her family statement was published in the Boston Globe: "We no longer have a daughter. We no longer have a sister. Evelyn Blackwell is dead to us." Her corrupt officials began falling, one after another, arrested in coordinated raids. The police commissioner resigned. The judge who had been in her pocket was removed from the bench pending investigation. Federal charges carried a minimum of 40 years in prison. She would spend the rest of her natural life behind bars, and everyone in Boston would know why. The news cycle carried her downfall for 2 weeks. Her mugshot appeared on every channel. Her crimes were detailed in excruciating specificity. By the end of the month, her name had become synonymous with corruption. By the end of the year, she was forgotten by everyone except those who had known her personally, and they pretended she had never existed. Meanwhile, the night before Mia ran to the restaurant, before she knew that salvation was waiting in the warmth of a kitchen and the presence of a man who could make her nightmares disappear with a single word, she sat alone on the floor of her apartment at 1 in the morning. The blizzard howled outside her window like an animal in pain. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and her apartment had no heat. The landlord had shut it off for non-payment of rent 3 months ago. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her thin coat wrapped around her body, blood dripping from her face onto the fabric. Her hand shook so badly that she could not hold her phone. She had $78 in the world. She had no family nearby. She had no friends who could help her. She had been sleeping in her car for a week before she had enough money to pay for 1 night in this apartment. She could not call the police. Douglas had told her that she had outstanding warrants, that if she reported him, she would be arrested instead. She did not know if this was true, but the fear was enough to paralyze her, to make her sit alone in the dark and bleeding, wondering if this was how her life ended. But there was one thing Douglas had not taken from her. On the shelf beside her, almost invisible in the darkness, sat a pair of child's shoes. They were small, perhaps size 6, made of soft pink leather with a single white star stitched onto the toe. They had been her daughter's shoes, the first pair she had bought her when she was born, 6 years ago. When she had lost custody after a judge determined that she was unfit, because poverty is a crime, because being a victim of abuse is treated like a moral failing, she had kept those shoes. They were all she had of that child. They sat on her shelf like a prayer. She picked them up. She held them to her chest. She whispered to them in the darkness. I survived then. I can survive now. It was not much. It was a whisper. It was the last defiance of a woman with nothing left to lose except her will. But it was enough. She forced herself to stand. Her legs shook. Her body screamed in pain. But she stood. She put on the only clean clothes she owned. She walked to the mirror and saw a woman who looked like she had already died. And then she made a choice. She would not give up. Not yet. Not tonight. She packed the shoes in her bag. She left the apartment. The wind hit her like a physical force, trying to push her back into the darkness, trying to convince her that this was futile. But she kept walking. She kept moving forward through the blizzard, not knowing where she was going, only knowing that she could not stay where she was. The restaurant appeared in front of her like a miracle written in neon lights. Warmth spilled from the open door. And the man inside, The man she had saved by cradling his daughter during a school field trip 6 months ago, had been waiting for her without knowing he was waiting. He had been waiting since the moment his daughter came home and described the beautiful lady who had held her and made her feel safe. He had been waiting since his men had found her in the school records. He had been waiting since Emma had drawn pictures of her face and those pictures had sat on his desk like sacred objects. He had been waiting in the only way a man like Luca Valenti could wait, through preparation, through investigation, through a determination that if this woman ever needed saving, she would find him ready. And now, everything that had come before, the violence, the blood, the terror, the systematic destruction of everyone who had dared to hurt her, had all been the payment he owed to the woman who had saved what mattered most. Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. 1 week later, the November rain fell soft and cold against the windows of the apartment Luca had secured for her on Beacon Hill. Not the penthouse. Not something that would frighten her with its scale and emptiness. Instead, a modest 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone, where afternoon light pooled on hardwood floors and the radiator clanked with the sound of actual warmth. Mia sat on the sofa, her left arm in a sling, the bruises on her throat fading from purple to sickly yellow. Her mother's surgery was scheduled for Thursday at Massachusetts General. Fully paid. Dr. Richardson had called that morning to confirm the date, and when Mia asked how payment had been arranged, there was only silence, then a careful voice saying the account had been settled by a private party who had requested complete discretion. She had not asked Luca. Some part of her already knew. The clock on the mantel showed 3:57 when she heard the car door close on the street below. Her breath caught. She stood, then sat again, unsure of the protocol for a moment like this. What did a person wear to meet the daughter of the man who had saved her life? She was wearing the clothes Luca's assistant had brought, soft grey sweatpants and a cream sweater, nothing that would catch on her injuries, nothing that demanded attention. Then came the footsteps on the stairs. Light ones first. Running ones. The knock was small, hesitant, a child's fist against wood. Mia opened the door and there was Emma, 7 years old with her father's dark eyes and a smile that held no understanding of the world's cruelty. Behind her stood Luca, his hand resting on his daughter's shoulder, his expression carefully neutral in the way that meant he was feeling everything. "You are the lady who saved me," Emma said. Not a question. A fact being confirmed. She launched forward, her arms reaching for Mia's waist, careful, so careful, her small face pressing against the sweater without touching the bandages underneath. Mia's hands came up to the child's back and something broke open inside her chest. The tears came without warning, silent and overwhelming, her good arm holding Emma while her body shook with the force of a week's worth of fear finally leaving her. "Yes," Mia whispered. "Yes, I am." Emma pulled back just enough to look up at her. "Papa said you are part of our family now." The words hung in the air between them like something sacred. Luca stepped inside and closed the door. His coat was charcoal grey cashmere worth more than 3 months of Mia's old rent. Water beaded on the shoulders from the rain. When he looked at his daughter wrapped around Mia's good side, something in his face transformed. The careful control slipped. His eyes glistened, and for a moment this man who commanded the underworld of Boston stood in a modest apartment and allowed himself to feel. "Emma, why don't you show Mia the drawing you made on the drive?" His voice came out rough, unfinished. Emma released Mia and pulled a folded paper from her jacket pocket. Crayon on white. A woman with yellow hair, not quite right, but the intention was clear, standing beside a little girl with black hair and a big smile. Above them, the sun and 3 clouds shaped like hearts. "That is you and me," Emma explained seriously. "And those are happy clouds. They only rain happy things." Mia took the drawing and held it like it might shatter. "Thank you, Emma. This is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. It is for your room. So when you feel sad, you know we are happy." Luca guided his daughter toward the kitchen. "Come, Tesoro. I brought hot chocolate from the restaurant. The kind with the real chocolate, not the powder." The Italian came naturally, a word for his child that meant treasure, that meant something irreplaceable. Emma skipped ahead, and Luca returned to the living room where Mia still stood holding the drawing, tears continuing their quiet path down her face. He did not try to stop the tears. Instead, he sat beside her on the sofa, leaving space between them, his presence steady and patient. "Why did you really help me?" Mia asked after a long silence. "You could have just paid me a reward for saving Emma. Sent money and gone back to your life." Luca was quiet for so long that Mia thought he might not answer. Then he turned slightly toward her, and she saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the thing he never showed to his men, the thing he had learned to hide when he was a child watching his father hurt his mother in the dark. "Because you and I are the same," he said. His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater, from very far away. "We grew up in darkness, praying someone would notice we existed. You noticed my daughter when she was lost. You held her and made her feel safe when you had nothing yourself. You noticed me, even when I was hiding behind power and fear." Mia turned to look at him fully. "You saved me on the worst night of my life. And you saved me on mine," Luca said, "by showing me that mercy still exists in the world. By reminding me that compassion is not weakness. That it takes more strength to break a cycle of violence than to continue it." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. His palm was warm, calloused in places from years before the suits and the empire, and she could feel the slight tremor in his fingers that told her this was not easy for him, this gentleness, this exposure. "I spent my whole life being nobody," Mia said. "Invisible. Working jobs where people looked through me like I was air. You made me feel like somebody." "You were always somebody," Luca replied. "I just reminded you. I just made the invisible visible." The kitchen timer dinged softly. Emma's voice called out that the whipped cream was getting droopy. Luca did not move immediately. He sat with Mia's hand in his, watching her face as if trying to memorize something essential. "I want to go back to school," Mia said. The words came quickly, as if she had been holding them for days. "I want to become a nurse. I want to help people the way I helped Emma, but on purpose, every day, knowing that my work means something." "Then that is what you will do," Luca said. "I cannot afford it. My mother's surgery is paid for. Your tuition for the nursing program at Boston University is paid for. Your books, your supplies, everything you need is paid for." He paused. "But you are right about one thing. You will pay me back. Not with money. Money means nothing to me. You will pay me back by being here for Emma when I cannot be. By being the person who holds her when she has nightmares about that day in the intersection. By building something meaningful with your life that matters more than anything I could ever own." Mia nodded slowly. "I can do that." "I know you can," Luca said. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on Mia's good shoulder while they read stories on the sofa, Luca carried her to the car. He returned alone, and they stood together in the small kitchen where Mia had made tea with shaking hands. The radiator continued its rhythmic clanking. Outside, Boston glittered under rain-washed streetlights. "My men want to meet you properly," Luca said. "At the restaurant. Tomorrow night. Will you come?" It was not a command. It was a question, and the fact that he was asking mattered more than the answer itself. "Yes," Mia said. "I will come." The next evening, Mia walked into Valenti's restaurant through the main entrance, not the service entrance, wearing a simple black dress that Tony's assistant had selected. No makeup covering the fading bruises, they were part of her story now, proof that she had survived. Luca stood as she approached, and his entire table fell silent. Marco, Enzo, 3 other men whose names she did not yet know. They watched their boss pull out a chair for her, watch him sit beside her so close that their shoulders touched, watch him rest his hand on the table near hers. "Gentlemen, this is Mia Harper," Luca said, and his voice carried the weight of an official announcement. "She is part of this family now. Anyone who shows her anything less than absolute respect will answer to me personally." No one spoke. The silence was profound, the sound of a world realigning itself. Enzo leaned toward Marco and whispered something too quiet for Mia to hear. Marco's eyes widened, and he looked at his boss with an expression somewhere between shock and awe. In 15 years, his lips formed without sound. I have never seen him like this. The meal was simple: risotto, grilled fish, wine that Luca explained came from a vineyard in Piedmont owned by a cousin Mia had never heard about. She ate slowly, listening as the men talked around her, gradually including her in the conversation, asking her questions about her life, her dreams, her recovery. None of them asked about the abuse. Some kindnesses are expressed through what is left unsaid. When the dessert came, Emma's name was written in chocolate on the plate, a surprise Luca had arranged. Mia looked at it and laughed, a real laugh, the first one since before that terrible morning when Douglas had found her. "What is funny?" Luca asked. "Everything," Mia said. "A week ago, I was praying to disappear. Now I am sitting in a restaurant with the most powerful man in Boston, and his men are smiling at jokes I make, and there is chocolate with a child's name on my plate. Everything is funny because none of it feels real." Luca reached under the table and found her hand. "It is very real. You are safe now. Emma is safe. And anyone who tries to hurt either of you will learn what happens when you take something that belongs to me." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like being wrapped in armor. 6 months later, Mia sat in the lecture hall at Boston University, her notebook filled with careful drawings of the circulatory system, her highlighter marking passages about infection control and patient advocacy. She was wearing the white coat of a nursing student, a credential so small that most people would not notice it, but to her it meant everything. It meant she had survived. It meant she was building something that mattered. Her mother had been in remission for 4 months. She was scheduled to visit Boston next Sunday for dinner at Luca's private home, a sprawling Victorian on Commonwealth Avenue with gardens overlooking the Charles River. Mia had helped Emma plan the menu. Lasagna, Emma's favorite, and a tiramisu that required 3 separate trips to the Italian bakery because Emma wanted it to be perfect for Nonna. The apartment that had been temporary was now permanent. Luca had transferred the deed to her name on a Tuesday morning, arriving with papers that his lawyer had prepared. When she tried to protest, he kissed her forehead and said simply, "A home is something no one can take from you. I am making sure you understand that." On Sunday evening, the table was set with 12 people. Mia's mother in the seat of honor beside Luca, her color better, her eyes brighter than they had been in years. Emma in her favorite dress, purple with white flowers, sitting between Mia and Tony. Enzo telling a story about the time he tried to cook pasta and somehow made it explode in the pot. Marco laughing harder than Mia had ever heard him laugh. And Luca, watching it all with the expression of a man who had built an empire to ensure that children never suffered as he had, to ensure that goodness was protected, that mercy was rewarded. When Emma reached for Mia's hand during dinner, he watched that too. When Mia's mother called her Le mi amor and squeezed her shoulder, he noticed that as well. Later, after the main course, after Emma had shown everyone her latest drawings, after the tiramisu had been served and declared worthy of a second piece, Luca excused himself and returned with a small wooden box. He placed it on the table in front of Mia. "Open it," Emma instructed seriously. Inside, displayed on soft black velvet, were tiny shoes. The ones Mia had kept since the shelter, worn brown leather, the laces knotted tight. They had been professionally cleaned, the damage carefully preserved, and mounted in a glass shadow box with a small brass plaque that read, "She kept these to remember she was human. She kept these to remember she survived. She kept these to remember that the smallest acts of survival matter." Mia's hand shook as she lifted the box. Luca stood and moved closer, his hand finding the small of her back. "These are the shoes of a woman who walked through hell and kept moving forward," he said, and his voice carried the weight of a vow. "These are the shoes of a woman who had $78 to her name and chose to help my daughter instead of running. These are the shoes of the woman I love." The table had gone absolutely silent. Emma was grinning, certain of the moment unfolding in front of her. Mia's mother had tears streaming down her face. I cannot offer you a normal life, Luca continued. My world is complicated and sometimes dark. But I can offer you this, a family that will protect you forever. A daughter who adores you. A future that is safe. And a man who will spend every single day reminding you that you are not invisible anymore. He lowered himself onto one knee, and the men in suits, Tony, Enzo, Marco, all of them, stood in respect. Emma squealed with delight, already knowing what was happening before it happened. From his pocket, Luca withdrew a ring. Not ostentatious, not a display of wealth, but a simple band of white gold with a single diamond that caught the light like a star. Marry me, Mia. Build a family with me and Emma. Let me spend my life reminding you that you matter. Mia could not speak. She could only nod, tears running freely now, as Luca slipped the ring onto her trembling finger. He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips, while Emma applauded and Tony whistled low and long. When they pulled apart, Luca whispered something only she could hear: family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. Mia Harper had entered that restaurant on a blizzard night with $78 and a death sentence. She left 6 months later with a nursing degree in progress, a mother in remission, an apartment of her own, and a man who had loved her before he even knew her name. Douglas Hale disappeared that winter, his name added to the missing persons database that the Boston Police Department would never close. Evelyn Blackwell spent 7 years in federal prison, her social standing obliterated, her name scrubbed from every charity board and country club roster. But Mia built something different. Emma's Table became the most exclusive restaurant in Boston, not because of the food, though the food was exceptional, but because of what happened there. People felt safer inside those walls. They felt like they belonged. And they should have, because the woman who managed it understood what it meant to be invisible, and she had made it her life's work to ensure that no one ever felt that way again. On their wedding day, 6 months after the proposal, Mia wore white, and Luca wore a suit that cost more than her former annual salary. Emma was her flower girl, scattering petals the color of hope. In the third pew, Mia's mother sat glowing, her recovery complete, her belief in mercy restored. Luca and Mia stood in front of everyone they loved and made promises that meant something because they had both survived everything that could have broken them. When he kissed her, the church erupted in applause. Emma jumped up and down, shouting, "They are married now. They are family now." And in that moment, nothing mattered except this: 2 people who had learned to disappear had learned instead to be seen. 2 people who had known darkness had chosen to live in light. 2 people who had been taught that they were nobody had become somebody's everything. Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. And they chose. Every single day, they chose. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.